Okay. And your hosts today are AK.
And Ivana?
And today we have Joe with us on the recording. And Joe, you just described yourself to me as a post-transformation dude, which I really loved. And you told us a bit about how you help companies that have initiated transformations towards agile practices and now need help. So could you please tell us a bit more about that?
That's pretty much all there is to tell. No, I've I've um I've ridden the transformation wave a few times, and I think the most enjoyable part for me, the part where I see meaningful change, and part where I like to participate in the meaningful change, is after the transformation has happened, a few years, people are settling in, and they see what parts are missing. You know that certain things are broken, and so my colleagues and I have come up with a few services to help help sort of fit parts together, help make more sense out of what's happening. We kind of refer to ourselves as the physical therapy of the delivery world. So you come in after you're a little bit injured, and we help get you back in shape. So yeah, I'm a post transformation dude.
That is a very relevant title, I think.
Yeah, and Joe, I'm so happy that you said yes to participate on the show. I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while, and I actually can't believe that you answered my message. So
Oh,
really
well,
excited
I'm
to have
glad
you.
I did. I didn't know about this podcast until you reached out, but as soon as, you did, and I'm glad you did, I listened to every episode. Now I'm like your biggest fan, I swear. I
so,
think what you're
so
doing
honored.
here is amazing. It's incredibly difficult, and what you're doing and how you're doing it. And yeah, I'm just beyond impressed. So I'm delighted to be here.
Well,
Thank you so much.
we're mutual fans now.
Yes.
Woo!
Well, Joe, just to set the stage for the audience that is listening in, what happens in the piece of the story that we're going to be talking about today? Could you just tell us in your own words?
Yep. So there's kind of two scenes. One is the scene where Marie has their own little team building exercise, HR exercising sort of at her level with Mark and Paul. And then the other one is when she goes to engineering and starts to explore that conversation a little bit. I think if I were to sum up what happens here is it's not the most eventful of episodes, but I think it sets up a lot. And in the theme of Marie, she's like a detective in a way. She's constantly discovering new things and new motivations, and I think a lot of those discoveries happen in this episode.
Thank you. When you were reading through this chapter, was there any theories, methodologies, like hooks you could hang the story on that came to mind?
um yeah, well, so I could only think of one methodology. It's not much of a methodology. um I think there were just so there's nothing really to solve here because the problems have already been sort of um discovered, and so we're already aiming in a direction, or the character Marie is already aiming in a direction. And I actually think she's doing a great job of uncovering this information. She has a real talent for getting people to share their perspective on what's happening, and that's no small talent to do. And it's not just because she's a character in the book, in the story, that you guys want people to, but you set her up in a way where she does it. You can see her doing it, and I think she even kind of does it naturally. I think she creates a space where people just find it really easy to communicate to her, even when she's talking about difficult things. Um, so yeah, it's because I'm a delivery person, and so some of my perspectives when I go in to work for an organization, they start brutal and they end soft. And what that means is it's very easy to try to get lost in trying to fix people problems. And for me, in my approach, starting with the people problem is a mistake. For my approach, and this isn't everybody's approach, but my approach is to start with the business problem. and then go back and see how people are contributing to it. Because, you know, you can get into a she said, he said, who's saying what, doing what, and all day long, and there's no resolution to perspective. And that's not, you know, if this was a neighborhood or if this was a family, that would probably be a very good approach. But this is a business. And so there were some interesting things that came out of it, which was like, as low, the quality is down and it's affecting customers. The current approach to communication with engineering potentially may be leading to that. It hasn't been proven, but there does seem to be a link. And you know, Marie's next step, I hope that she clarifies, she needs to clarify what Jenni's role in all of this is and the reasons that she's doing the things she's doing. And maybe even test the awareness of Anne's influence and all of that. You know, some interesting things happened with, you know, learning that Anne was fired. They didn't, I was a little disappointed Marie didn't ask who fired her, because they said we fired her, and they, you know, they didn't really specify who. I was disappointed. I understand why, because she's obviously a little bit shocked by hearing that. So she wasn't in her like detective mode at that. But if I had to guess, I would guess that Anne was holding things together from her perspective and probably doing a good job to it. Jenni potentially might be new to this role, or at least new to this role in this culture. And Jenni's approach was not being effective. So potentially Anne was trying to sort of play both sides and make both sides get what they want, you know. So Jenni gets the perception that things are happening the way her way, and then but the engineers and everybody can communicate. The problem with that, and this is maybe why, so the problem with that is that Anne could have very easily put herself into a position where it looks very much like she's undermining Jenni. And this is one of those weird things where, like, who's right, who's wrong. And for me, and this is, I mean, I've been in Anne's role, and I've done this, and I've been burned for it. Even though what I was doing got the best results for the quote unquote company or for the customer, it didn't get the best results for what I was doing is I was undermining the support for the team, because I was going directly against what their leader was saying. So the leader couldn't learn from their decisions that they were making. And even though I was doing the right thing, quote unquote, I was undermining the support structure that was supposed to be there for the engineers. And Anne was doing that too, it sounds like. So I do think Anne was doing the right thing if Anne was the leader, but she wasn't the leader. And so by interrupting that, you're kind of making it unsafe for Jenni to fail. You're basically saying, we don't trust you, Jenni, as our leader, therefore I'm going to step in and do it. And in a business, and this is hard, especially if you put your heart and soul into a business like in Zebra Apps, where people are passionate about it. It's not just a job. There's actually meaning behind it. They're trying to make an impact. It can be really hard to help develop your leaders when your leaders make bad decisions. And I don't know the backstory. You know, my question would be like, did Anne try to approach Jenni, and then Jenni said no? And if that's the case, you might kind of understand why she tried to do that, but that still doesn't necessarily make it okay. And by okay, I don't mean that she's doing something bad. I just mean that she's undermining the support of the environment. It's a hard call, and it's a personal call, and Anne made it, and I'm sure she feels great about it. but now we have Jenni, who's picking up exactly where she left off pre-Anne, and she has the exact same skill level with her engineers that she did before, because Anne had separated Jenni from her engineers. So she has actually kept the company from growing in a certain direction. So in that sense, I do support letting Anne go. I don't think Anne was creating a coup. I don't think Anne wanted Jenni's job. I think Anne genuinely believed in the product and just wanted it to work. And because of maybe Jenni's experience level, she wasn't able to work with Anne's passion to focus her correctly and not get herself separated from the engineers. So, it's a two-way street, but I think we also forget that, leaders are just as incomplete as we are. And when we try to cut them out of the decision-making, particularly when we don't even want their job, we're actually cutting out a very significant amount of support and development for everyone else. Because, Anne's got this other job. She's this product person. She's not doing development for the engineers. She's not making architectural decisions. She's making sure people are connected and doing all these other great things, but she doesn't really have the experience to help that community grow. She can keep them focused on doing something and doing it well, but there are other things to consider. So long story longer. You asked me what theories or models. My theory or model is the give them rope model.
Oh, the give them rope model.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
This is something that I've had to learn again through trial and error, and people have done it with me. I looking back, I've realized is anybody who wants something bad enough that they are willing to cut you off in the middle of a sentence to get it, let them have it. I mean, granted, there are some, not on the extremes level. Obviously, if safety is a factor or anything else, you don't want to. There are moments, but in general, if someone wants to own something and is not going to hurt anybody, make it very transparent. Say, I guess you've got this, and then just watch them do it. Chances are, what they want is something that most people want. The way they're going about it may be bad, but by giving them rope, they're either going to learn to swing or they're going to hang. And I know that's really harsh, but we learn by swinging and hanging. We don't learn by staying in the middle. Like most people learn. Some people are excellent learners and they can learn from other people's mistakes. Most people have to make their own. And so potentially what Anne could have done is made sure she was a part of the conversation and given Jenni rope and made what she was entering into transparent, but also leaving a door open to say, because Anne doesn't want her job, to say, hey, if you have any issues with the engineer, I'm happy to coach you. I'm happy to tell you what's worked for me, what the investment is, and I'm happy to hear you say that it should be different, but it's not. Anne had opportunities there that maybe she didn't take, that would have made it more sustainable in that environment, and also would have allowed her to do her job eventually, to get back to that. So give them rope.
I love that theory or practice or hard learning.
It's a hard learning, but I've seen people swing and I've seen people hang, and I'm always happy about the swinging. I'm never happy about the hanging. But also, I'm always there to tell them that there's something to learn from it in a nice way, not in like a but but in a nice way. But
I think also it's an important point that even though Anne may come off as the hero, especially now that she's gone from the organization. Oh, when Anne was here, everything was better. But in fact, her struggle to keep engineering together was detrimental and a part of the reason why the engineering organization is where it is today.
Yeah. So and that that's why there's no such thing as a good thing and a bad thing in most cases. There's just the thing you're doing, and kind of thinking, and this is also the kind of thing that you can't really predict unless you have experience. And so, this is probably Anne's first time. This is probably an exaggerated aspect of Anne's personality coming out. Maybe Anne is a little bit of a control freak. She also sounds like she's extremely empathic and intuitive as well. So like she had both of those things happen at once. And so she had two of her strengths going at once to fix what she saw as a problem, but maybe she didn't at that point have strength in working with leadership. Part of the thing that makes Anne is her rebellious nature. It's what allows her to think outside of the box. It allows her to rally troops and inspire them. But maybe she has issues with leadership. Maybe she doesn't trust leadership. And maybe that's her growth path. I don't know. I like Anne, by the way. I think she's cool. I end up liking most of the characters after you guys sort of expand them out a little bit. They all have really good backstories.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are, Aki. Now we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I was just speaking. No, I was just saying that I love how you kind of analyze the dynamic between Jenny and Anne, and you came up with so many new perspectives that I didn't consider. For
Maybe they'll
instance,
come out in future episodes.
yeah, you never know. No, but especially your point about how Anne could have helped, like offered help to Jenny instead of kind of fighting her method. And of course, we don't know exactly what happened yet.
We have no idea what's happened.
No, but I think that was a really good point. And I was also curious to ask, is if there's any of these themes, maybe especially in the engineering department, that you recognize from your work in real life. Is there any of this you see happening?
Communication is always hard when you get into larger organizations. I don't think Zebra Apps is extremely large, but I know I end up working for like banks and telcos and regulated industries that have a fair amount of people. That's not necessarily where I want to work. I mean, all people are good people, but I'd love to work in other industries if anyone else is listening. but yeah, so communications is always tough, and there are a lot of different approaches on how to do it and how to take time to do it. Basecamp has a really good. It's been a while since I looked at them, but they used to have a really good philosophy on how to use their tool in the written word to communicate effectively, and I've adopted aspects of that into something I call backlog literacy, which is using the tool to communicate. And communication isn't a one-way street, and people all have to be able to not just read something but interact with it and respond to it. So I think if everyone is having to sit around and having one-to-one meetings on things, there's probably the company might be running on a lot of assumptions, and it's probably miscommunicating a lot, and that's probably another thing that Anne accidentally did on the bad side was interpret all those things. So she as long as she was there, it was good, but people weren't learning how to communicate across, because one of the things that the main engineer even said was that she took the time to do the one-to-ones and everything, and because Jenny wanted effective meetings and that sort of thing. So Jenny actually might have a really good idea, like she might be time boxing people to force them to think about what they say before they come to meetings. Like I've seen that approach. There are ways to do it wrong, and there are ways to do it right, and there are ways to do it kind of mediocre, but that is an approach. It needs to be followed up with examples and connecting it to results that people want, and it's a whole thing. But like Jenny might have actually been trying to get people to communicate better by not picking up for them, and then then showing them things like quality or whatever she's measuring for productivity, if that was important to her at the time. So who knows? But like I see it a lot. I see a lot of weird solutions for it. I see a lot of good. Here's a really good example. So I was just talking to a guy I used to work with at one bank who now works at another bank. And he was talking about how he's working with a consulting agency, and they're helping him with their big room planning. And I was like, "Oh, how often do you do big room planning?" He said, "Every 3 months." And I was like, "Okay, how many people go to this big room planning?" He's like, "Oh, 300, 400 people." I'm like, "Okay." And they do it mostly virtually, so it's not too costly in terms of venue and food and whatnot. And they have digital tools to assist a lot of the conversations to make them more effective, which is great. They also do personal ones, I guess, every once in a while to communicate. But I said, those things are they're not permanent. You shouldn't always need a big room planning. What you do normally, we would use big room planning to if they're not good at planning together, like a tribe or a function, or maybe even a whole organization, if you really want to get them to line, it sends a nice cultural message to say, hey, you guys can talk to each other. Hey, you guys have these, learn about everything everyone's doing, and then just reach out and make friends and talk. They're great for that. And you might run big room planning for a year, but on the back end, you should be training them on how to communicate every day, you know, and how to be aware of what other people are doing in ways that matter to what your team is doing and that matter to the big picture. That your environment should be making it easier for you to make those decisions, so you don't need a big group planning. Not every 3 months. You know, you can plan and you can find dependencies and you can organize with other teams through the tools that you have. We now live in the 21st century. We have amazing tools right now. Use them, learn how to use them. So yeah, I mean, it's a problem everywhere I go. I mean, I wouldn't have a job if people communicated well.
Well,
I don't think it's just developers. I think it's everybody, but yeah.
I agree.
I would be curious to hear your reaction to the situation where Marie waits at the whiteboard where she's expecting people to meet up and have a conversation about their board, and no one's there. And then there are all these unused whiteboards in the hallway. Now that we're talking about tools, is our whiteboards over now? Have we moved beyond whiteboards?
I think it's like any. So okay, it's a good question because even before the pandemic, we were asking that question because, you know, the tools were becoming relatively, like ADO, Azure DevOps, and Jira are becoming relatively useful, whereas before they were a little bit clunky. Now they're a little bit better streamlined. I could go all day on the things that don't work. Don't get me wrong, but they work better now than they did before, and so they're more useful in general. And so, you know, I was working at this one bank, and we were given a fresh tribe, my compatriots and I. And they had to put their work in Azure DevOps, which was fine. And then somebody asked, should we also make them do whiteboards? And it was a debate that went around. And then at one point I said, well, look, right now, if you've got a place where your work is, whiteboards offer a place to sandbox the conversation. What they do is they offer you a place to put the concepts of the work up in a similar column or whatever, and then move them around and talk about what would happen if this happens and then this happens, which you can't really do in the digital tools. You can't sandbox how you think it'll play out. That would be a great feature if anyone's listening, but like you can't like look at a bunch of user stories and say, I think this one will be done Monday, this one will be done Friday, and this one will be done. I think you could work here. You can't visually move them around like that, and then go back and have all of your data preserved. So I was like, you know, if we're teaching, and we should be teaching them, particularly in planning on how to do that, then I think, you know, a real board or like a thing like Miro is a really, I use Miro all the time for those conversations, is a really effective way of, you know, kind of like playing imaginary with your next, you know, week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, just to help you make that plan and play out the what ifs. And making it visual allows everyone to participate in it, whereas just talking about it, only a few people can probably get into it. So I don't think whiteboards are dead. But I don't. It's not the whiteboard itself; it's what the whiteboard can offer, which is a place to play, imagine, change what actually is, and imagine what could be. I don't think that's. I mean, please don't ever get rid of that. It makes it so much harder for you to improve if you can't imagine a different future.
I also noted that it seems that they now moved into virtual talks with their Jira board and everything. And that's it does seem like there is kind of a barrier by making like turning it from physical to digital, that makes people not speak up. It's also easier to hide behind a turned off camera, or like a muted button. And also, I think there was something about this whole dynamic of moving it into a visual space and also having Jenni join if the psychological safety is not there to kind of speak up when she's in the call in the first place. That
was a really interesting one. And I didn't entirely agree with the engineer's take on Jenni being there. So I agree, probably it wasn't a good environment for her to be there, because whatever result she hoped that she would accomplish by being there, she probably wasn't getting. She's probably getting the opposite. But the goal for any sort of meeting of which you're talking about the work should be an open door for anyone, as long as they're not disruptive. So like, you know, that doesn't mean that that's where they're at. But if I'm working on a team and the CEO comes in and wants to just listen to us talk, come on in. Yeah, I don't. We're working for you. Well, not really for you, but we're, the leaders need to go in and see how their decisions ripple through the organization. They need that learning just as much as we need help from them. So like, I think having Jenni there and engaged and showing support would be amazing. But her typing on the computer, just letting the silence and stuff go, unless she's so like, if this was like the first time she sat down and she saw this and she's like, this isn't effective. I still want them to work on, because I know like half of our teams are distributed. I still want them to be comfortable communicating digitally. That's fine. But she should be following up with those teams one by one if she has to, and just build trust, get them to figure out what they aren't talking about and why. Maybe they don't actually know how to manage their own workflow. Maybe they're excellent developers, but they don't know how to manage the workflow. Maybe they don't know how they fit in the big picture. Maybe they feel pressure from a salesperson and they can't, and they're upset because they can't fix or refactor work that they know would make their job a lot easier and more meaningful and make customers happier down the road. But they don't necessarily make the distinction between, a salesperson and Jenni, because Jenni should be fighting for them, to say, do the things that are right. We've got problems. I'll make room for that. But for some reason, there's a disconnect there. So she should be there cheering them on. She should be there, like the best situation. She goes into like a random stand-up and she listens to it and she just had her heart flutters and she's like, wow, like you guys are, I learned something, like when a leader can go in and hear professionals talking about something that they're really good at and how they're managing it. And in bonus points for even taking advantage of a leader being there and asking for help that's going to help their next sprint, like that's the dream situation. So I think Jenni should be there, but like the fact that she's not getting a really great reaction, hopefully that leads to her following up and doing some development in that space with them.
That is a really good point. Yeah. So the problem is not that she's there. That could actually be a huge benefit for everyone. The problem is the way it's kind of conducted right now. There's some issues with they're not talking.
That's right. So the funny thing is you always believe people when they tell you. So the problem is that she's there. It isn't in real life, but it's perceived that way. So that's probably a first clue. So that's probably like, from Marie's standpoint, probably the first point of inspection. If the engineers are saying, kind of hinting towards that she's the reason things are the way they are, then she definitely is causing something, whether it's intentional or not. Yeah. And she's either causing it or seen causing it. So either way, she's that gravity center of that issue. And so that's probably the best first place to start and get her perspective. What's it like to be in the middle of that, looking out?
There's probably also different ways of entering such a meeting as a VP. So, I mean, she could be curious. She could be like, as you say, tell them they did a great job, tell them she learned something. Or it could be like, is it with an intention to control what they do and tell them, I want you to, whatever, do it like this, like, get in the details of how they do things or something, then maybe it could be damaging. So it's also very much up to what is Jenni's intentions actually with joining.
Yeah. And chances are they're probably good. I mean, in the sense of her job, like apparently, like chances are it has something to do with what she thinks she's supposed to help with. Yeah. Just the way she's doing it. It'd be interesting to know from Jenni, like, has she ever been in their position and had a leader sit in, and did she feel like that helped or not? Because sometimes we repeat the trauma. So like she could be repeating something that was traumatic to her. Yeah. Because that's just human nature. Or she could be repeating something that was good for it, but just it doesn't have the experience of the person who did it, and so is doing it in a really bad way. So
yeah. You're right.
I would be curious to get your perspective on, you can say, the situation that Jenni finds herself in. She's alienated from her departments. She also feels that they need fixing. She asks Marie if she could fix engineering and work her HR magic. And when she tries to do the things that she knows how to do, it doesn't work and actually backfires in her face. So And so she's angry, the engineers are angry. How does one move out of that state?
Well, I mean, there's so much that could be going on. Like Jenni at Jenni's best could be amazing. Maybe she's got some things outside of work that are just messing up her game. You know, like personal things that, you know, we couldn't even imagine that are horrible, or completely decenters her from herself and makes her question, you know, what she's doing. So there's that aspect. There could be like things completely out of anyone's control in this company that are making Jenni completely ineffective at her job. The more likely thing, though, is that she's just really bad at it. I mean, like, so, you know, many people get promoted into jobs where they're just horrible at. And I've worked for people like that, and they've, I think, technically have been good people, but they've been really hard to work for, and it caused me a lot of stress. And I've had to come up with methods of not letting the, we learn through trauma, but I think she's probably just not good at her job. So maybe either she was promoted a little bit too early in her career. Maybe she doesn't have a good support system. You know, sometimes people can get promoted into something. Maybe she's a fantastic engineer, but actually, and maybe she had, in her last job, she was a really good engineer. Maybe she worked with a team of also really good engineers. None of them wanted to be a manager. And so she had more people skills than everyone else. So she became a manager, but because they all knew her and they wanted her to go to the meetings so they could do that, she ended up looking really good because she had this team that was already performing. She already had the relationship with it, and it made her look really good. So she probably, she could have had a lot of successes in this, but she was never put into a new environment where she had to start from scratch, and then lead people. So she doesn't really have any leadership skills because of something like that. She probably has them latently, but she doesn't have them actively. She doesn't know how to use them. So it could be that Jenni needs leadership support. Of, you know, if she's in the position already, she knows the product already, she knows the people already, it might be better to just get her some leadership support and have her swallow some pride and try out some new things and learn, and everyone will be grateful for it, including her. Or maybe she's just horrible at being a manager. Like, some people just, it's okay. Like, I'm not good at every job I do. She might just not be a leader in that sense. She might be a leader in a different sense. Maybe she's more of a team leader rather than like a department leader.
This ties back to something you said earlier about people problems and what to address first, and not to assume that everything is a people problem. So when we're looking at the situation with Jenni, what is the thing that you would look at first? The potential people problem of Jenni, or some of the dynamics around her?
So the problem in this scenario, as far as I can see with the information I have, is that the quality of the product is down and it's affecting customers. That's the problem. Jenni needs to make sure that that's being taken care of in a way that balances the other needs of the business. That's her job, and she needs to make sure her people know that. That's going to land on her eventually. You know, the CEO will, you know, as soon as they start to lose enough customers, or the reputation starts to lead to lower sales, or, you know, all the things that happen when quality drops and customer satisfaction drops, and you start losing customers, particularly when it's linked to quality. There will be an initial blame game around sales and pressure and stuff, but that's what Jenni's there for. Jenni's there to help balance that and to push back on sales, hopefully in a constructive way, you know, to make the decisions that she's able to. So she should be like, you know, she should be focusing them on quality, and she should be interviewing her people. Is like, why is it, you guys had great quality up until a year ago, what changed? Okay. And maybe she should work with, you know, partner with Marie, because Marie's already in that space, to say, can you find out what made the quality change? I will, and then maybe even work with Marie to get suggestions on how to engage with the engineering team to help them focus on quality, and ask for any help with pushing back on marketing to have like a temporary lull to get a better run in the market where you're not going to lose customers again because of quality. So that's her job. That's what she should be thinking about doing, and that's where she should be focusing. All the other stuff she has to work through, it's much easier to grow as a person if you're focusing on an external goal that you share with other people. It's much easier to change, and it'll be much easier for the engineers to change. They don't have to like Jenni. They don't have to forgive Jenni. They just have to know that Jenni is there. Jenni just has to communicate to this, say, this is our new focus, and I'm here to support this and only this until we get it right. And just tell me what you need. And she can prove herself. Everyone wants to forgive, and everyone would be happy if she steps up. So all she needs to do is step up. And it's much easier to do that if you focus on real problems rather than focus on Jenni's a bad person, Jenni's not good at her job. All of that goes away when you have a really tangible goal that you guys all face together. And you can try out those new skills to get that goal, and you can get feedback under the, it's not about you, it's about getting that goal that's external of you. So, people are more likely to change or to focus on that if they can focus externally. So get out of the people and get into the
That is good advice.
Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't,
yeah.
but in my experience, it helps a lot.
Yeah. I had another question. So we learn here that some of the more senior people on the team, they are kind of reluctant to take in the new people joining. And I think there was at some point someone said, like, we don't want to teach them our ways of working or something. There's like it's kind of a conflict going on between or at least some resistance going on between the older employees and the new employees. What do you make of that situation in a company like this?
You're talking about with the engineers?
Yes.
The ones that were trained by, was it Jonathan? What's it?
Richard, yeah.
Richard, that's it.
The co-founder who left.
Yeah. So completely natural reaction. They probably were very open to it, but then the other people came with their own experiences and suggested changes, and that felt, like you go through this period where like people enter into your space and you want them to just appreciate everything that you do and think you're wonderful. And then after they do that, you're open to hear other ideas on how you could change. Then you're like, oh, you're part of us. You understand how pretty and wonderful and great we are. Well, what's this other thing you want to do? That's fun. That's new. Let's do that. So that, that's it. But a lot of times, you go in and someone says this is a safe environment. We all work together, and you're like, good. I don't like the way that you're doing something. I think that the way that you're doing it, and chances are they're right, but they're right and they're wrong. So they're probably right in what their suggestion, and it probably is something you should learn. But they're wrong in the sense that they have now accomplished something that they didn't want to accomplish, which was put themselves on the outs. So unless you are in a very unique culture that appreciates that level of bluntness, you can make room for that level of bluntness and that level of honesty. It still hurts, but you can make room for it, and you can encourage it as long as it's constructive, and that's a skill unto itself, but that's very rare. And then you can tolerate it, which is I can hear it, I can let you say it, I don't have to listen to it, but I can make sure I can, toleration sounds like, hey, I actually think that you guys are labeling your work wrong. Thank you for sharing that information. And then you move on. That's tolerance, right? Like, so you thank them because you want to have the appearance that this is a place where you can, it's safe to share these like really blunt realizations.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you for your input. Exactly. But depending on the day and how stressed people are, you might just create an argument out of that. That doesn't mean it's wrong to be blunt. I think this quite often I really work hard to embrace people in my life that are very blunt with me, because I know that it's almost always a quick way to get something that's important. But it's never easy. It always hurts. And I think it's just, it wouldn't surprise me if they had a really perfect environment, then someone changed. They see it like a AD and a BC level of separation in their history, where like things changed at this point. You associate, you sort of imprint your idea of the universe on these things. And these new people are coming in and they're fresh and they're like, oh, this is new. But then these other people are carrying this trauma that that, from this guy that left and all these changes. They might want to hold on to some of these things. They may not want to. They it almost sounds like the company's fighting against the new direction in a lot of ways. And ultimately it's up to the CEO and the board. And I hate to say this, I really do, as someone in delivery who's always the victim of a CEO or a board. Ultimately, it actually is up to them what direction they want to go. Now, a CEO in a good mind space on a good day can see a company fighting them and see that as an opportunity. A CEO on a normal day, being a normal person, will probably just add pressure to get their way. So I think what we're seeing is a very natural reaction to that situation. Do I think it's constructive? No. Interesting point about me is I don't believe in dysfunction. Which is controversial. Well, okay, let me put it this way. I believe it exists, but it only exists in our mind, because dysfunction says more about the person saying the word than it does about the situation. Dysfunction is your expectation of what should be happening, not what's actually happening. We live in a world of cause and effect that exists whether we're here or not. Everything is functioning. Everything is reacting to something relatively rationally. Dysfunction, particularly when we come, there are extremes where we could probably agree there's dysfunction, when it's medical or when there's danger and stuff like that. But like in general, with teams and in an organization is not dysfunctioning. An organization is functioning appropriately for the motivations that it has and for the environment that it's in. So when I see a team that's doing exactly what you said, where like is kicking out all the new members when they try to sort of like add their own culture into it, I don't see a dysfunction. I see something functioning. And the reason that I think that's important to make that distinction is if I think it's a dysfunction, I'm going to try to fix that behavior to look like the way that I think it should. If I think it's functional, I can get curious and going, I wonder what's motivating that. And then at that point, I have the opportunity to raise that awareness and share that awareness with people. And sometimes that awareness is enough to let people decide if that's the function that they want to continue to support, or if they want to continue to support a different function. And so when we talk about like teams and things not working, I actually like to go, and you guys are functioning exactly the way that you should be. Do you like the way that you're functioning? Okay. How would you like to function? And so there's almost like an inherent prejudice in that word. And because of that, there's a danger of missing really important information that's in front of you.
I think my meditation app would agree with you.
Oh, really? What's your meditation app?
It's Insights Timer. But a lot of the lessons that I'm learning through meditation is to stop judging the moment. It's all about, well, this is the moment, and a lot of the like negative emotions you can have about a moment is your judgment of the moment and not the moment itself. So if you let go of judgments and just approach, well, this is what is happening, then it's way easier to navigate, rather than again trying to align. It should be like this. It's like this. We need to fix it so it's the way that I envision that it should be. So that's
which you can do. You can do. But But again, this is my approach. I don't necessarily think it's wise. It's what works for me. But that said, is I've seen people that have a completely ironically fixed agile mindset, and this is how
that is ironic.
Yeah, it is ironic, right? But also produce amazing results. So and I think because they're so consistent, it makes it easier for certain people to align and stuff like so. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but for me, it's more interesting to think that everything's doing exactly what it should be, and it's just upsetting people versus it's dysfunctioning.
I would be curious to hear your perspective on the fact that all of these teams in engineering, they do not have any Scrum Masters. And they have a strong reaction to not having Scrum Masters because Richard told them how things should be, and this is how we do it.
Yeah. Man, if you were to talked to me about 4 or 5 years ago, I'd have a very different answer to what I have right now. 4 or 5 years ago, it would be, you always need a scrum master, you always need an agile coach, you just don't know it. And now, now that I'm a post-transformation dude, and our sole product is about helping teams attain skills that allow them to own and manage themselves. I kind of see the role of the scrum masters now. There's this phenomenon that I've seen in the market with scrum masters where and agile coaches where they hire a bunch of them and they're expensive. And they hire them for a ratio. We have 20 teams, therefore we have 5 scrum masters, and there's 4 teams per scrum master. And the way that they place them, there's variations on it, but it also tends to basically be, you hear the word fairness a lot. It's not fair that they get scrum masters and we don't get scrum masters. And so as soon as you hear that, you get into a ratio distribution of scrum masters and agile coaches. And then we get into something I like to call agile hot rocking. And hot rocking is, if you know anything about hot rocks, is it's a rock, it's hot, and what you do is you put it in the middle of something and it radiates warmth. And so it's kind of the same philosophy with these agile coaches, is we're like, oh, we'll just put them in the middle of 4 teams and they're going to radiate agile, and these teams will absorb the agile and they will become agile. And surprise, surprise, it doesn't work. At best, they do help startup teams. They help acclimate people. Quite often, these coaches end up being more change managers or HR-like people, coaching people emotionally rather than necessarily on delivery, which is great because there's benefit to that. But you don't really see them creating self-sustaining teams. And so I have a talk that I've done once or twice, and it's always, because what ends up happening is the organization pays for these coaches, these expensive coaches and these expensive scrum masters for 2-3 years, and they realize they don't even know what the results, quote unquote, are, but they're not getting the results that they expected, and so they end up firing them all, or basically making that job it doesn't exist any longer, and they do that because they hope now that they think that the scrum masters and the agile coaches are holding the teams back from being self-managing, because they see the scrum masters are doing Jira for them and they're running all of the ceremonies and they become dependent on the scrum. And they're kind of right, but they also kind of miss the point, which is no one ever taught these teams how to self-manage. And like, that's its own skill set. You get rid of all the managers, but you still need the managing skill set. And you need it to be distributed, not centralized. And no one actually takes the time to train teams on how to manage in that particular environment in an effective way. And so for me, when I asked, I go into these groups and I give my little talk, and I was like, what's the one thing that you guys are supposed to deliver as scrum masters? And when I say self-managing teams, it's always like quietness. And because it's never that easy, right? Like, you're always, it's hard to make self-managing teams when they're constantly making new teams and reforming them, and there are all these challenges that come with that. But essentially, that is what the business expects you to do. It expects you to go in and create a team that can manage itself, create transparency, engage with stakeholders, and not need you for every day. You can still get invited back in as a coach for unique problems, or when things are outside of their range of experience and they need to reset or they need to baseline. There are a lot, you never have to get rid of an agile coach or a scrum master, but you shouldn't, if you're a scrum master and you're with the team for like 5 to 6 months and you've been doing the same thing for 5 to 6 months, there's something wrong. You shouldn't be running, they should be running the ceremonies at some point. You should be teaching them how to. You shouldn't be tracking the work for them. They should be tracking their own work. You don't have to start them all off at once. You can drip feed them to teach them these skills one by one. But, at some point, they should be running themselves. And that's really the whole point. So, the long answer to that question is, I think it's great that they don't need scrum masters. And as long as, I think the thing that they're failing on is the quality thing. And I don't necessarily know that a scrum master would have made a difference, because you have a product owner. What are they doing? Why aren't they making a fuss? You have Jenni. Why isn't she making a fuss? And again, Scrum Masters can act a lot like Anne does, and they can actually keep people from being effective members in the business by trying to do all the things that are quote unquote right. So, don't be an Annie Scrum Master. Be a Scrum Master that goes to Jenni and go, I'm not gonna. I will tell you it's happening, but I'm not gonna do it for you. So I can help you do it if you want help, but I will not do it for you. But I will tell you it's happening, and you're the only person that can really fix this. And if you don't fix it, you're giving over control over to. You're separating yourself from the team. So, but there are so many people that you don't have to wait for a Scrum Master and Agile coach to have those conversations. There should be conversations Agile coaches and Scrum Masters are good at, but that's not an exclusive skill set, So, yeah, I don't think that they need them. Could they use a really good Agile coach? Probably right now, but I think Marie is filling in a lot of what I would do as an Agile coach anyways, which is, what is the field? Where are people being influenced? Where are people dropping the ball? Where do people need help? So they don't need a Scrum Master. They got Marie.
Can I ask a question about self-managing teams?
Yeah, please.
So in your experience, what are the key factors that need to be in place to set a team up for success in terms of being self-managed?
Yeah. So I have this conversation at the beginning of every contract because we don't go in and just teach a course. We don't even necessarily teach the same thing over and over again. What we do is we assess what the environment is willing to support. So we have a philosophy when we do training, and I'm doing little quote marks. We never train a skill set. And so if we're teaching a new skill set to a team, which is to self-manage, we also have to vertically train the organization to support that skill set. So if you want transparency from your team, you have to react to the transparency. If you want them to produce transparency that creates self-improvement, you need to invest in showing the team that it's valuable to them to do so. If you want them to make good decisions on, quality and whatnot, you need to reward when they make hard decisions against sales or, I'm not making sales out to be the bad guy. Sales was awesome. We need sales, but do you know what I mean? Like these are the normal conflicts that happen in an organization. So this is where leadership's super important. A team, anybody, but also like a team will do the least amount to get the most value. And they should. Absolutely, they should. So, holding people accountable isn't about like staring at them with a mean face. Holding people accountable is telling them regularly that you see them. And like, hey, I noticed that I looked at your distribution of priorities for your class of service, and it's very different this week than it has been the last 3 months. That's really interesting. Tell me why. What's happening in your world that made that change? That's not a negative comment. You're not critiquing on it. You're not saying they did anything wrong. You're saying, hey, I notice when you do something and it changes, and I'm curious about you because now you're an opportunity for me to learn more about the business. These, quite often it's really easy to forget with all the pressures that happen in leadership positions that you actually need to devote a large amount of your time to paying attention to the people that you're there to lead. And there are so many different techniques on how to do that. And I couldn't even begin to recommend anything, but I've been in the situations and I know that it makes a difference. So we focus on something external of people, and we focus on a skill set called backlog literacy. And that's the ability to tell a story through your work using a tool, and not just tell a story, but also to hear the story, and not just hear the story, but interact with the story. And so we focus on like that being a central pillar, and that could be a board on a wall, but quite often for us it's like some digital tool. And there are ways that you can use them that help you communicate, and there are ways that you can use them that don't communicate at all. They're great for you, but not great for anyone else. So we tend to use that as a external focus point, as a way of engaging people around, because you're not looking at the person, you're not looking at the role, and it's really easy to tell when it's working because when you can read something, you can respond to it. And when you put something down, when you're writing a user story and somebody's going to look at the backlog, you think about how they're going to read. So you're not just writing it because somebody told you to fill in a template. You're writing it for that person. And it's that switch where you're like, I am not just planning my work. I am not just doing something because the Scrum Master told me. I am communicating to 1 to 20 people who I know look at this backlog. And because of this, they won't have to have a meeting. Or if they have a question, they can ask it on the work itself in the comments. And we don't have to have a meeting. And I can ask, I can answer it directly. So all of these things and using the tool to sort of communicate can really help with that. So for us, it's backlog literacy.
I kind of want to look back to the leadership part of the first part of this chapter is all about the HR team gathering together and trying to foster intimacy and trust within
I really
themselves.
liked how her and Paul ganged up on Mark. I thought that was cool because not cool, but like it was so relatable. Like how often have you I have an instant friend now because we're the kids and they're the adults, and I totally related to that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this was an important moment because until now it's been Paul and Marie that have been at odds with each other, and here they find this this moment to bond over Mark. But I was curious, what was your takeaway from that piece with HR coming together, trying to share experiences that make them human?
Sorry, I just lost my internet connection. I lost audio there for a second.
Oh.
Apologies.
No worries.
I'm going to make you edit this.
I will.
That's totally fine. Have you
sorry,
had...
what were you saying about Paul and Mark? Yeah, so up until that point, it's just been Paul and Marie, right? Sorry,
Yeah.
Mark and Marie.
Yeah, exactly. And Paul and Marie were barely speaking to each other and not even saying hello in the hallways. And now they finally experience this chance to bond. But then it kind of ends perhaps without any resolution or perhaps with some resolution.
Yeah. So, which is normal. I really liked Anne's. I think Anne's comment to Marie set that. She predicted that was going to happen, and rightfully so. There is no worse gift you can give to yourself than to expect that you're going to solve a problem with one conversation. And it's like it's a lotto ticket approach, right? Like it's saying like, I think that my problem, even though it's so big that it actually bothers me, can be solved by one conversation. And what you're like, we're all hoping that it's like it all hedges on one thing, like you're gonna unmask someone and like, oh no, we solved it, Scooby-Doo episode done. But the reality is, like if you have an issue and there's a it's a personal thing, there's trust involved, you should really set your expectations for 6 to 10 sessions with that person or people before you get anywhere close to just set your, and if it ends up being 1, great, or if it ends up being 5, that's fine too, but set realistic long-term goals for those sort of things, because that's the investment that's needed with in between people, and to earn trust and to learn how to communicate. A team has to create their own language, and it's ironic that everyone will be speaking the same language in theory, but you learn your own shortcuts for how to describe something, because you describe an experience that you share together. That's what language becomes, is a description of an experience that we shared. And once you start to build that language, you can only do it when you share experiences. That's when you really, you feel like you belong, you feel like safer to, people understand your context more. People don't take you necessarily as seriously as they did before, which gives you more freedom. And also, like, you've all seen successes or seen things that worked in the same way, so you're aligned on things as well. I think that I read that and I felt exactly the same way that you described, which is like, oh, it's disappointing. But then I was like, well, of course it was. Like, this is the first of what hopefully is many. And actually, I thought it was good. Like, I think I might have cried a little bit when like a little, like, I'm not even kidding. I was like, when Mark was telling his story, I was like, oh, about his wife and like getting a ticket and
Yeah.
the wife, kid, and I'm just like, oh, that's brutal. But he also kind of set them up for that too. Like, he told them the story without giving them all the information, and because he must have, I don't know, he's a funny character. But no, I really liked that interaction. I thought it was good because it broke down a barrier between Paul and Marie, and I thought Mark as a leader handled that really well. I thought he did a really good job of holding the space, helping them through that conversation, but also being vulnerable. So it's not easy to do. So I had a lot more respect for Paul after that. Sorry, Mark, after that.
Yeah. I also think this is the first time Mark really steps up as a leader and kind of
steps
into character, which is really good to see.
Yeah.
And we can also
you could tell Marie appreciated it.
Exactly. Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Yeah.
Which is why, like, we want our leaders to succeed. I mean, barring, again, extremes where if your leader is a complete fascist and you're like, actually, I hope you go away. That's a little bit different. But most of the time, if our leader is ineffectual, what we want them to do is be more effective. We want to have a good leader. We want to feel supported. We want to be able to trust them. And so I think we forget how easy it is to course correct. Like if you're a leader and you haven't been present, and then suddenly you come in and you decide to be present, you can feel really apprehensive about it. And it's really nice to respect that space, to go like, I can't just walk in like we've been doing this the whole time. But at the same time, they really do want you there. Like it's like if you go and speak in front of people, one of the ways that I use to sort of get over, the anxiety that comes with speaking in front of hundreds of people is I remember every time I go see someone speak, I take a note of how I feel about them. And every time it's, gosh, I just hope they do well. And if they stumble and I'm like, recover, go. You just take a breath, take a sip of water, you do what you got to do. Yeah, just keep going. And if they break down and they cry, I'll be like, man, that's really hard. I tell you what, if she needs to walk off the stage, or if he needs to walk off the stage, he can walk off the stage. I got respect because that's really hard. But I really hope he pulls himself together. I'll give him a standing ovation if he finishes. So you really want the people that are in front of you succeed, because it's more enjoyable to see them succeed.
Oh my God, this reminds me so much of I do improv comedy as a hobby. And often cool. Like people from the audience tell me that that's kind of they feel very much involved in the performance. They're like, ooh, come on, you can do this, recover, find an idea, you can.
Yes.
It really requires like the audience to be in a mindset where they're like cheering for you, because it can be painful to watch if you stumble.
Yeah, you're there. You want to be entertained. You don't want to just see someone that's not doing a good job. It's like, I paid money for this. People will forgive mistakes if you keep going most of the time, and if you pull yourself together and you get back in there. And so, I mean, we live in a culture where it's really easy to focus on the negative because there's a lot of it out there. But I think for the most part, people really just want to see other people succeed.
Yeah. Joe, it is such a pleasure talking to you, but we do have to start to wrap up soon.
Oh, okay.
Running out of time. I feel like we could go on forever, but yeah, we would like to ask you, what do you think will happen next in the story?
Ooh. Well, let me tell you. So I think, so in terms of Marie, I think she's going to go talk to Jenni. I don't think she'll make the same mistake she made with Anne and put it off. I think she's learned her lesson. She probably should just dive in there and talk to her. I don't know what she's going to learn, but based on what I've listened to so far, it'll probably be interesting. The one thing I really do like one of the many things I really like about the story is the more you get to know your characters, the more you realize their motivations and the more you can relate to them, which I find to parallel real life very well. So I think there'll be that. If what will happen? So she'll do that. You know what? This whole story is leading to the CEO. There's a reckoning to be done there, and I don't necessarily think Marie is the person to do that reckoning. Maybe it's with Richard, maybe, but I think Marie should be there to witness it. I think Natalie is she's got a lot of things to face into. She's potentially saved the company by focusing on the things she has, but she's also created a culture that maybe potentially makes it a little bit unstable right now. So she does have some things to face. She seems smart. She seems motivated. He actually seems like a pretty good leader, but yeah, I don't know. Like I'm kind of hoping for like a resolution, but it's real life, so there is no resolution. So I don't know. I think first it'll be Jenni, and I think this is moving towards Natalie, and I think Richard's going to make an appearance at some point, which will be great. I can't wait for his appearance. And I really hope it'd be nice if after talking to Jenni, she reconnects with Anne, and we get some more perspective into the thing that we talked about. You know, I sort of speculated on maybe what was happening, but it'd be nice to know what was really happening. But I'll be listening, so.
Thank you. Well, those were great points. I'm excited to see what happens too. Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. This was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, likewise.
Before we stop completely, though, if our listeners want to learn more about some of the things that you mentioned or yourself, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Joe Auslander. I'll give you guys a link if you guys want to put that in. Also, I have a podcast that I do with my friend Jakob, and it's called Jokob. You can look it up, and maybe you guys can put a link into that as well.
Would be happy to. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. It's been really enlightening for me, at least. I have a lot of notes.
Oh, thanks, guys. I honestly, I'm still fanboying that I'm even here talking to you. This is so cool.
Thank you.